Striking. Hey everyone, and welcome into our first ever loosely related Minisode. A little bit of a Minisode. We had been talking for a while, but wanting to start putting out some extra content, and we know you guys have been clamoring.
You guys have been begging for it and pleading with it. We have people outside my house
on our doors,
all night long, keeping me up.
It's a reverse protest. They want us to not stop loosely related.
Yeah, it's insane. It's
you know
insane,
what, Dad? You got to fix your mic a little bit. Turn that towards you a little bit. Your mic is running away from you. That's what it is, man. Your mic is like, listen, I'm not getting enough loosely related, so I'm going to leave if you don't start doing more.
It's my loosely related podcast, which is loosely. Okay, anyway.
And we heard you guys, so we wanted to go ahead and do this. So we had talked a lot, on this show we talk a lot about movies and TV, and we talk about video games. I mean, really do everything. Like a lot of loosely related topics. One of the things that we have not talked about too much, and believe it, and it's probably because you guys didn't even know that we could read, but is books. And believe it or not, we do read books.
Yeah, books. Once in a while.
I don't know how to read.
We have a few right here in front of us. If you're watching us on YouTube, you can see we got 3 books up here that we will be talking about.
And many more behind the table over here.
Yep, behind the table and in your brain.
Yeah.
And,
There's a button on the left of the paneling.
It's a library.
It's a revolving bookcase.
Yeah,
yes.
it's an opposite Batcave. It turns into a bookcase. It doesn't lead to anything. Yeah, exactly. But so I had mentioned just some of the books that I loved, and it kind of got us talking about it, and we really wanted to talk about it on the podcast because it makes some recommendations for you guys. Some of these books, if you have read, maybe let us know if you've read it. You can always find us in the same places. You can find this Minisode in the same place you find a regular episode. You can Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Play Music. You can find us at our website at looselyrelatedpodcast.com. And if you want to shoot us an email about your favorite books, maybe give us a top 5 list, top 10 list. If you're like me, you have a top 27 list. Yeah. You can send us an email at looselyrelatedpodcast@gmail.com.
Sure.
But first of all, right off the bat, one of the big things I want to mention is this book right here. So this is my favorite book of all time, and that's why I mentioned it, and I think this is what kind of started it. So it's a book called The Looming Tower by
and you'll
Lawrence
see the graphic.
Wright.
You're going to put a graphic up?
Yeah, you can put a graphic up. Like I said, it's this book right here. If you're watching this on YouTube, whatever. But it's a really great book. So it's basically the full title is the Looming Tower, Al-Qaeda, and the Road to 9/11. And to just give you a little brief synopsis, it's a narrative history of the events leading to 9/11, and it really gives you like a good look of like just the amount of failures. Like, people want to believe in conspiracy theories, and they want to believe in all these different things that they knew this and they let this happen, and they don't understand that in reality, man, most of these things, it's just stupidity. It's just stupidity, and a lot of it is hubris
and complacency.
And it's just it's them. There was such a lack of communication between the FBI and the CIA about all the different information that was known about known terrorists and different meetings that had taken place over the course of 2000 and 2001, and it led to just nothing being done about Al-Qaeda and the rise of Osama bin Laden and his control over these regions and of just the minds of his followers. And it's a really phenomenal book. It's the author, Lawrence Wright, is a Pulitzer Prize winning author. And they also, if you don't like to read, which, let's be honest, most people, I think, would much rather watch something. Well, The Looming Tower, this book, was actually made into a Hulu miniseries, and it's actually a miniseries right now on Hulu. It's phenomenal.
I didn't know that.
It was nominated for
all right,
Best
so we can put this
Miniseries
book away because I'll probably watch that
there you
instead.
go,
So we'll put this one on the side.
That's
I'm not going to read that one.
Yeah, that's what he's talking about from him.
Exactly, right.
Oh, there you go.
But anyway, so I mean, what do you guys got? So Rob, Dad, what do you guys? Do
you want to talk about yours, Rob?
You want to go into your books a little bit?
Sure, I'll talk about my book.
Because I'm just impressed over the fact that Rob can read. So I'm writing.
Actually, I was an avid reader when I was younger, and it kind of just fell off, especially after going to school for so many years.
Yeah.
I was fatigued by having to read books that I didn't necessarily want to read. But when I was younger, I enjoyed reading quite a bit. I liked going to the library and just like entering a world of fantasy and.
Did you say library?
Library.
Okay.
Library.
Yeah, right.
I probably did say library. I still get made fun of the things I say. So at the Biblioteca, we would enjoy many books there. I used to love especially going into Manhattan into like the library with all the references.
Yeah.
And just like the history behind some of the books. I kind of like the whole atmosphere, to be honest.
Really, that's awesome.
People go
yeah.
into libraries anymore?
Yeah, I don't know.
I haven't
maybe.
been in a library in
Probably
so
not
long.
as much as you would think.
When I was
but-
studying, though, I would go to all the ones in the area, and I would make lists of ones I liked.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Top 5
actually.
based on like what amenities they had, what did they have for resources,
Sure.
the location. I'll tell you, one of the best kept secrets in Newburgh, unfortunately, is their library.
Really?
It's amazing.
Newburgh
So now
Free
you know what our
Library. Wow,
next,
there you go.
now you know what our
It's
next Minisode's going to be.
Faced as
There
the
we go.
Hudson River, has beautiful, picturesque
Yeah.
views, panoramic because the windows all the way down.
Yeah.
So you forget that you're in like a hood, basically.
Yeah, pretty much.
Plus, a city like Newburgh has a tremendous amount of funds that go into those libraries.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
true.
So
yeah,
they
yeah.
have periodicals, they have magazines, they have a bunch of stuff that we kind of spoke about when I was talking about some episodes ago about
Yeah.
And they have a
how to
whole,
save some money.
Yes,
You
yeah,
get
yeah.
ebooks and audio books
yeah.
for free.
last time I was in there, they have a
amazing.
whole bank
Yeah.
of computers you could use. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, they have that now. Yep.
Yep, no more Dewey Decimal System and microfiche.
Yeah,
I'll tell you
yeah.
that.
Yeah, man.
So anyway, so I chose kind of 3 books that are representing different genres, I guess.
Yeah.
One up here, I guess I'll start with Blink is from Malcolm Gladwell.
Okay.
He is he's a pretty famous author
Yeah,
now,
he
but
is.
Blink is his second book. His first book was actually probably his most popular at the time, was The Tipping Point.
Yeah.
Now it was about like how things go from nothing to like huge, how things jump to shark per se, or like how Hush Puppy Shoes were like nothing at one point and then they become explosive. You see them everywhere in the city, and that's a really good book too. But Blink is
Really?
my favorite. I want to remember what he says as Blink is basically the subtitle is The Power of Thinking Without Thinking.
Okay.
And it's kind of and it's an inherently known thing. So when he explains it to you, you're almost like blown away that you've never considered it before. And what it basically is how the majority of people don't realize they're making micro decisions based on information they kind of inherently know.
Yeah.
Based on like expressions, people's facial and body
Like
expressions,
subconsciously, right,
having
Rob? Like
seen
that,
things exactly, and they're in the recesses of your mind. But and he gives so many different examples of how some of the greatest and worst decisions are made at a Blink. That's why
Yeah.
I'm saying that.
Oh, okay.
And
Yeah,
they
yeah.
show one of the examples in there is how one of these tennis coaches knew that his guy would double fault. He could tell before he would do it. He goes, he's going to double fault. And
Really?
and they were like, how do you know this?
the heck?
Wow.
And it's like just the way his posture, he knows just based on like something, he could link it together. There was a marriage counselor, a psychologist who could tell within minutes of seeing a couple with a very high rate of accuracy which ones would last at least 10 years and which ones would not.
Are you serious?
Yeah. And then he explains how they're able to do this. And I think it's called thin slicing. Can you see that, Brian, at that show? I would hate to tell you about a book I really like, and I haven't read it in a while, but
Yeah,
I think it's from 2005, I believe.
Okay.
So it's
Thin
called
slicing, the book,
thin slicing is the idea of what he's talking about.
is
in
a
the,
term used in psychology and philosophy to describe the ability to find patterns in events based
There you go.
based on Jesus Christ. I think I just had a stroke. I can't read.
So yeah, so that's thin slicing. So and he gives a ton of examples of it. So it's almost like, do you ever think like we all watch baseball here at some
Yeah.
point, right?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
Do you
yeah,
ever
of course.
know that this guy was going to hit a home run before he hits it? And you're
Yeah.
like, I knew he was going to hit it.
Right.
I
Yeah,
knew
yeah,
he was
yeah.
going to. But
Yeah,
you can't
yeah.
really articulate why you know he was going to hit
Yeah,
that homer.
yeah,
Right.
You're
yes,
like, am I
yes.
seeing the future? And that would be like an example of thin slicing. Not just based on
what the hell?
and there's a lot of other things that go into it, but
Does
he
that have
explains
anything
it.
to do with like cold cuts, like thin slice?
Yeah, then they show you.
Yes.
They always have to show you now when you go to get deli. They're like, "Is this
Yeah.
the slice you want?"
Is this
I
a
fill up
thing?
with. Now, can I get a centimeter thicker?
Yeah, it's
Can
like-
I make it a little small, a little thicker, a little
That's another
smaller.
topic I could go on for 30 minutes about
Yeah.
his freaking delis needs, but keep going.
All right.
Yeah,
well,
so basically
Brian, that's
that's
you
the-
and only you on the planet Earth. I think.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So that's the gist of it. Like I said, he's also done Outliers, The Tipping Point, Blink, which is my favorite, and most recently, I think David and Goliath was like in the late 2000s. That's the last one I remember,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
But if you haven't ever read this book, it was actually the first gift I gave my wife, then girlfriend.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and she really enjoyed that book as well. So I highly
Okay.
recommend it. My
Yeah.
father, I think, recommended it to me. I recommend it to a ton of people.
Sounds good to me. I've
it's
never
just,
read it.
It's so interesting. You'll
Wow.
rip right through the book.
Okay.
Cool, man.
There you go, man.
Yeah.
Sounds like a good
So then,
one,
Robert,
man.
what is this other one here? Because this one, the reason why it has a joystick on it, and it says console and games. So of
Yes.
course, my tiny brain immediately is drawn to it. So I definitely wanted to ask you about that.
So this is Console Wars is a very popular book amongst like gamers and that type of industry. I
Yeah.
found it as a recommendation, and though it didn't have it's successful and that's one of the most popular books in gaming, but
Really?
it didn't get a great critical reception, basically because the guy who's the author,
Yeah.
and you can see it right here. The author is Blake Harris.
Yeah.
He writes it based on like interviews and stuff that might have happened behind the scenes. So some of it is like putting back together what he heard at the time.
Okay.
So, it's gotten dinged for that, but basically what it's for, it's a book from 2014 that talks, the main character is Tom Kalinske, I believe his name is.
Yeah.
And he was a big businessman. He did, I think, Mattel and Matchbox. He went to the other team and made, like, Hot Wheels a huge thing again.
Oh, really? Wow,
So he ended up wanting to go on a family vacation, and he's approached by the president of Sega. He comes all the way from Japan. I think he's in Hawaii, and he finds him on a beach because he kind of went incognito. But
Holy shit.
he was well known as, like, an idea man.
Yeah.
And he was like, on vacation, what do you want? And anyway, he talks him into going back to back to Japan with him, or to Hong Kong, I believe.
Yeah.
And he shows him all the secret Sega stuff that they're working on, and he's like blown away because at the time Nintendo was everything.
Yeah,
Nintendo
I was going to say, what
a
Sega
Goliath.
was like, yeah.
Sega was like, they might have
I
put
mean,
out
no
the Master
offense,
System, right?
Sonic is great,
No.
but I'm like, but Sega,
Right.
like,
And so he's actually a huge part of that, and it's how this scrappy little company becomes to compete against the Goliath Nintendo.
wow.
So,
Holy shit,
and all
really?
these like unique things they had, and
Sega, Nintendo.
Sega was at the tip of bankruptcy. They were really pointing fingers at each other. They had a
Yeah.
huge miss with a game they put tons of money into. They didn't really understand certain aspects of business.
Right,
So
right.
it's about how he comes and he makes them competitive again.
Really? That's not
and
what I thought it was going to be about, honestly.
So it's like the rise and kind of the subsequent fall of Sega. But there's so much
Sega.
more behind the scenes
Really?
and
What the
interesting
hell?
characters. It actually starts with the guy, Tom Kalinske, going to this factory. I'm probably saying it wrong, but I think it was Hot Wheels or whatever, but it ends up, he goes into this factory and he ends up running out because it's being run on, it's all counterfeit. The whole factory's
really?
Because they realize they're losing money and they're like, how the hell are they selling our product here? We don't have a factory.
Right,
So he
right.
calls back to the base. He's like, we have a factory here. And the guy
They're
puts
like,
it together. He's like, Tom, get the hell out of there.
Get
And
out of
they're
there right
like,
now.
all these people start cursing at him in Spanish and stuff. Anyway.
Oh,
So
shit.
it's pretty interesting. It has all kinds of behind the scenes things that like how people found out about the Master System and how Genesis was brought on and how they actually went from
Genesis,
Altered Beast to having Sonic.
Sonic,
That was
yeah, the
Kalinske
big
move
one,
to
yeah,
make
right.
him their icon, and it became
Sure.
like this scrappy thing. They accepted Mortal Kombat when Nintendo was more family friendly.
Right.
So they started that whole war.
That's
But
awesome, man.
It's a great book, another quick read. It's
That is
very
honestly
enjoyable.
awesome.
That sounds-
It's funny
that
when I
sounds
first
good.
saw console games. Of course, my first thought was like, the console wars, of like the Xbox and
Yeah,
PlayStation.
that's- yeah.
I never
Yeah.
would have thought in a million years it was Sega
Right.
and Nintendo. So
The
that's gotta be
very end of
fascinating.
this book actually
Yeah.
touches on how PlayStation came about.
Yeah.
And how the guy, Mr. Kalinske, Tom Kalinske, urged them to get into a deal with Sony, and it ended up they went against him.
Oh,
and
wow.
They didn't think it would be anything.
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
it blew
and then
up.
that was it, and then that's all they had to do. Wow, that's crazy.
That's wow.
Yeah.
All right. Well, those are our two great books. I think I'm definitely down to read both.
Yeah,
of those.
no, it sounds really good.
Dad, what do you got over there? You got?
I got a
some
lot.
Books.
I got a
There's
lot of books to.
It's so I know. Are you you got Cat in the Hat?
Cat in the Hat.
Yeah.
Green Eggs and
Greg saying
Ham.
Green Eggs
Red
and Ham
Fish,
is one
Blue
of my
Fish.
favorite
Yeah,
books.
I know.
One fish, two
Yeah,
fish.
one fish, two
One
fish,
fish,
blue
two
fish.
Blue
yeah, they're amazing books.
They are.
They're quick reads.
They are easy
not for me,
reads, easy
but they're
reads,
quick reads for
you
most
know.
people. Yeah.
They're on most college reading lists.
I think so. They're must-read books. You
Yeah.
know, I have a bunch of different books that I've read over the years, and I'm going to just shoot off a list of my favorite ones.
Yeah, go
So,
ahead, man.
Some of these books, I'm sure a lot of people have read because they're pretty popular books
Yeah.
in their day. And
Sure.
I know Rob read these books. I don't think you have, or if you
Okay.
did a little bit. But one
Maybe
of
a
my
little
favorite
bit.
book series is the Harry Potter
Oh, yeah.
series.
Oh,
hell
J.K.
yeah. Yeah.
We
Rowling's
all read
Harry
that,
Potter
right?
series.
Absolutely. Oh, I didn't read the whole thing. I read like books 1 through 4, I think, and then I
I
kind of
remember when this guy was reading it at work one day. I was like, "What are you, 5?
Yeah.
What the
You
hell
know
are
what
you
you would
reading?"
do? You would.
I was
you
such
would,
a naysayer.
Yeah. You guys would go out at midnight.
Yeah, we did
and
that.
you would wait in line at Walmart. I'll never forget. You guys
We
came
did
home
that,
and you
man.
were all sitting in different parts of the living room just reading. Like it was like the
Yeah,
craziest thing. I'll never
Rob
forget.
was beginning to
Yeah.
say that he saw me reading this book and he thought I was reading a children's book, which it was. It tended
Yeah.
to be a children's book, and he was making fun of me. And I said, I'll give you the first book, bring it home and read it. And if you don't, and I said, I guarantee you'll be back for the other books. He literally came back the next day, finished the book, and wanted the second book.
Yeah,
It
man.
was so good.
And
Addicting.
it was just you can't stop reading those books.
Can't.
Just, you know, they're amazing books.
Yeah.
Brian, I know that you probably read all the
Yeah,
books,
I've
right?
read them all.
Yep.
Great books. and I read all 7 of them, and they're
You
amazing.
did, yeah.
Also, so definitely read those. And John
Yes.
Grisham was one of my favorite authors.
Yeah, definitely.
And he's
always
written a
was.
lot of
Great books, man.
he's written a lot of books based on law and,
Yeah.
and judges and courtrooms and blah 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 and lawyer
Yeah, like
experiences
conspiracy
and-
type stuff.
Yeah,
like
all
that
kinds
too,
of stuff like
like
that. And the
psychological thrillers, I think you would call them, basically.
Yeah.
Right? Like Time to Kill and stuff like
The
that.
Yep,
Firm.
exactly.
Yeah,
Time to
The
Kill.
Firm.
I didn't
The
actually
Pelican
listen.
Brief.
Pelican Brief, yeah.
The first one I ever read his was The Firm, and
The Firm,
I
right,
just that was another page turner
Yeah.
book that I couldn't
You
put
did
down.
think it was about male homosexuality, though.
Yeah, wait,
Well, that's why I kept turning the pages.
That's
but-
like you're trying to please don't be about this.
But anyway, so The Firm I read the first time, then I read The Pelican Brief, and of course, then I read Runaway Jury, which was an amazing book.
Great! That's a great movie too.
In the one you just mentioned it, I didn't actually put on my list. I read that one too. The Chamber, The Client. All of their books. He's
Great
written,
author.
I just happened to look it up when I was looking up the books. He has a list of books that he's written. And,
Yeah.
I haven't read them all, but those were some of my favorite John Grisham books, and they're page turner books. So if
Yeah,
you haven't
they're
read
great.
them,
If you're into like psychological thriller, like
yeah,
action,
they're all
would
just
you like
conspiracy. They're just the little guy overcoming the big, overcoming the machine, basically.
Sure.
In The Firm, it was basically about a lawyer who was a really good lawyer in a good school, and he was recruited by this firm in a southern law firm, and they paid him a lot of money, gave him a big house, a car, gave him all this stuff, and then it turns out that and he was so happy about it, moved down, but then it turned out to be nefarious in the end, and he had a...
Yeah.
But read that book if you haven't seen it. There's also, of course, everything I've mentioned so far, there's also movies, so you can watch the movies
which
too,
is great.
but-
Like, I feel like certain authors, their books just translate better into films than others. You know what
Yeah,
I'm saying?
yeah.
Like, I feel like Tom Clancy,
yeah.
his things, like he's very similar to a John
James
Grisham,
Patterson.
Yeah.
James Patterson,
Those
all
are
his
good.
stuff, the Alex
This one
Cross
came a
novels and
spider,
all
yeah.
that. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
But like even Tom Clancy, like his have been video games. I mean, Tom Clancy,
Rainbow
The
Six.
Division,
Yeah.
Rainbow Six. You have Ghost Recon. You
Yeah.
know, all that stuff, and then of course his big thing is the Jack Ryan series. Tom
Jack Ryan,
Clancy,
Tom Clancy,
You know,
yeah.
I mean, they've made movies, TV
Yeah,
series.
and I
about
have
that,
those
you
on
know?
my...
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I
no.
didn't even mean to.
But one of
There
my
you go.
favorite books that I've read of his was a movie
Yeah.
called Clear and Present Danger,
Oh,
which
yes,
they made a movie out of that as well.
Yeah.
But it's great to read the books and then see the movies.
Yes, I agree.
Because of course the movies are not going to get. They don't give you the whole picture of the book, and so much, especially when it's like the Harry Potter books. Some of those
man.
books are pretty big. You're not going to fit all the story into it.
Yeah,
so it's
for sure.
good to read them, and and I'm old school. I just read books. I'm not an e-reader. I never will be. I'm the Jean-Luc Picard of reading because he doesn't read. He reads all his books. In the 7th century when he's got his books. Everybody else is reading it on the pads like everybody does nowadays.
All of our Star Trek listeners out there.
For the Star Trek listeners out there, but yeah, I'll always read books.
Are you out there?
Are you out
Are
there?
you
Might
out
be.
there?
That
They're
one
out
guy's
there.
there. He's still there.
They're out there.
Yeah. So is that you got you
No,
got
and
more? I'm
I
sorry.
got more.
Yeah,
I got a lot
I know
more.
you because you always love to read.
So I read. I read J.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit.
Oh yeah.
That was brutal. I remember when you were reading that.
No.
I can't tell when you were rereading it, I'm sure. But I could never tell, like, his words are so
Well,
thick.
that's why I like.
It's
That's
like
why I
it
brought up The
became
Hobbit because
boring.
no,
Yeah.
the Hobbit was an easy read.
It's such a hard time.
I'm not
The
talking
Hobbit I
about
read when I was younger.
The Hobbit's
I had the
easy to
Hobbit
read.
set.
It's not
My
like
parents
I tried reading the
Lord of the Rings,
Lord
right?
of the Rings.
Yeah.
They're very difficult to read.
Yeah.
I don't know what it's
They're
real
good
words.
books,
or he's
but
making
it's
them up
just
or-
he has
exactly.
movies. He has song words in there. It literally the first 7 chapters of the Lord of the Rings, the Two Towers. I guess it was the first. No, the Lord of the Rings,
The Two Towers,
Fellowship of the Ring was the first
Yeah.
book.
The
Fellowship,
Two Towers and then the Return of the King.
What?
And if
Ring
you've
to
seen the
rule them
movie,
all.
of course they team up and they leave the village,
Shire,
the Shire,
they leave the Shire pretty
and they
quickly.
go into the woods, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was 7 chapters.
Yeah.
Yeah, he
Seven.
really goes into detail.
And he goes into a lot
7
of detail.
chapters.
I think
They
it was
didn't even
Smoking
get. They
Peyote.
didn't even
Yeah.
get out of.
He's the kind of guy who'll be like, and he cut the steak, and it was juicy and red, and then he chewed once, chewed twice,
And then there's
page
songs in
10, it's like,
between and
chew-
poems.
chew 20 times. Come on, man.
And
It's
it's
that
probably
part of it.
Yeah.
And then Beetlebaum begot this person who begot that person.
yeah. So that it was hard to read, but The Hobbit wasn't like that. The Hobbit was more of a story. It had some of that in it, but it was a much easier read, and it was a cool It was all about Bilbo Baggins.
Yeah.
Bilbo.
And it was fun to read because I read the book, and then when you see the Lord of the Rings and you see things in it, you see what happened because it refers. Like when you see the 3 elves, or with the big, the monsters that froze into stone, the trolls.
Cave trolls.
That was it, of course, from The Hobbit and Bilbo Baggins and his story. So you don't know that unless you've seen that. But it's interesting. Very cool, one of my favorite books that I've ever read.
That's based on a true story, right?
Yeah, loosely based on a true story.
Yeah.
And I read a huge novel, and I loved it, and it became a movie. It was by Elizabeth Gaskell called North and South. It's about the Civil War, and it's about how people. Families were destroyed and torn apart in the middle of the war, and it was just a whole epic story of that kind of stuff. And it was another actual page turner. It was like 1,100-page book, but it was fun to read. And they made that into a 3-part miniseries, I think, for TV. That was in Patrick Swayze was in that movie with other people, and then of course one of my favorites. You guys should check this book out because I thought this was an amazing book. It's called The Boys from Brazil.
Boys from Brazil. Okay, what's that?
I can guess. The firm. Dildo Baggins.
Oh my God! Wait, so what is this? What is Boys from Brazil?
All right, so the Boys from Brazil, after World War II, most of the Nazis who didn't get caught and tried escaped and sought refuge in Brazil,
went to Argentina
in South America. Well, this story sort of is about that and how one of the more famous war criminals, German guys, brought DNA of Hitler, and they started cloning Hitlers because they were going to re-up the movement with the Hitler.
Is this a true story?
It's so true.
It's fictional.
It's a fictional
I wasn't
thing,
sure
but
if this was based on.
It was about
sounds like Nazi.
They wanted
science.
to
really
bring
does.
the Nazi movement back, and in order to do that, they were cloning Hitlers, and they were trying to raise these Hitlers in the same type conditions that Hitler himself was raised in, so that they can generate a new Hitler for the new movement.
So wait, does that mean that they what do you call it? They rejected them from art school?
Yes, probably. They would have had to do all that. They had to do all of that, right?
Yeah.
He had to become a priest and try to be a priest, and then decide not to be. He was actually going to be a priest or something like that.
Yeah.
But it's a really cool read. That's a fun one to read. That's a great list of books.
I think that's solid list of books.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, for me, I know there's a lot of great books that I think a lot of people, there's so many genres of books that I think everybody likes. I've become the genres that I like over the years have changed.
Same here.
I always liked, fantasy, Harry Potter when I was a kid and all that. As I've gotten older, I really got more into this nonfiction type stuff, and I just really love it. A lot of people find it boring, but I love to learn about these big events that happen. Like one of the books I besides The Looming Tower, which obviously follows the actual story, and it's amazing the interviews he got with a lot of these people who really were the FBI agents that were in charge of all the different investigations and stuff like that. I love these nonfiction books, and the other one that I wanted to mention.
Nonfiction also.
So this other book, it's a great book. It's The Big Short, which is Big Short Inside the Doomsday Machine. This is by Michael Lewis, and as I'm sure you probably recognize from the title, it's also based off of the Oscar-nominated film, The Big Short. And this is the author. Michael Lewis is the author's name, who's a phenomenal author, one of my favorite authors. If not he might be my favorite author. He also wrote The Blind Side, the movie about Michael Orr, and he also wrote Moneyball. He wrote the book Moneyball, which is a phenomenal. Moneyball is one of my favorite movies, and The Big Short's one of my favorite movies as well. But The Big Short essentially follows the housing crisis, the collapse of the housing crisis. It basically follows along all the mistakes that were made and all the terrible things that kind of happened that led to the entire just collapse of the housing economy.
I watched the movie. Was
and the start of the financial crisis in 2008. And as an accounting major, maybe that's part of it. I've obviously, the world of finance is very big in my life and all that. And I think reading this book and learning firsthand of all the intricacies and all how the different CDOs and the MBS products really were the sort of the culprit that kind of or at least the catalyst behind the collapse. Of course, there's a lot of moving parts.
Sublenders. readers.
Yeah, but I definitely think that it's a great book, and if you guys wanted to, I highly recommend it. And also look at his catalog. And Michael Lewis has written some amazing books. He also wrote a book called Liar's Poker, which is another great book. It's about the world of finance and about stock market trading and things like that. And highly recommend all these books. And yeah. And then the only other thing I would do is the other thing that I do love to read. I love nonfiction, but as you guys can probably tell, I'm a big Marvel guy, DC guy.
Yeah, of course,
I love graphic novels. Some people
novels.
don't maybe consider them books. I consider graphic.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, like comic books are comics, but graphic novels to me are amazing. And I tell everyone to read this book. If you have never read it, it's an easy read. It's quick. Go out and buy it. You can get it off of Amazon. It's Batman: The Killing Joke. It's a graphic novel written by Alan Moore, who's one of the greatest graphic novel authors of all time. And it really is. It's like the headline, this book, the actual sort of description for it literally says, for the first time ever, the Joker's origin story is revealed in this tale of insanity and human perseverance. So basically, it's essentially what most people consider the official and only real origin story of the Joker.
Wow.
So if you haven't seen the movie The Joker yet, or you want to go out and see it, now is the perfect time to read this book. Highly recommend it. You can kind of compare the story and this origin story to the movie origin story, because that just came out for the first time ever. Highly recommend. It's a great book, probably one of the greatest graphic novels ever written of all time.
Huh.
And besides that,
as an honorable mention, I never read the book, but at the time, I think when I was reading The Firm, there was another guy reading a book, and I worked at Letterly's at the time, and I was reading that, and he was reading a book called Jurassic Park, which was written in '93.
There you go.
Michael Crane's Jurassic Park is excellent.
Yeah, and I heard that book. I never read the book.
My family read it, the same copy of it during like a 1 week camping trip.
Really?
Like we were just sharing. It was so good.
Wow.
Yeah,
No way,
I heard
It's
it was
excellent.
a great
Is it about?
read.
Is it Jurassic Park?
Yeah,
The movie was based off the book.
But it's
It came out
so
right
good.
after.
Yeah,
It's so
hell
good.
yeah. That's one of my favorite movies of all time.
You should
There
read the
go.
book because they say the
Check that
book
out.
is really, really very good.
All right, that sounds good to me.
And since we're talking about books, I thought it'd be interesting because when you mentioned the books, I wanted to do a bestseller list just to see what was there. And there's actually a couple of books on the top of the
So
list.
bestselling, is this bestselling 2019 or is this, what
best
is this?
ever besides the Bible?
Oh, so
which
the
is
highest selling
books of all time.
Okay.
And actually, I've been reading the list, the first couple of books on the list, I think I'm going to actually read. I want to read them. I've been interested in reading them. Hopefully not hard reads. But the best-selling book of all time on this list is Don Quixote.
Oh, Don Quixote.
By
okay.
Miguel
He's
de
a steel
Cervantes.
driving man.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
I think I
that's
had to
the
read that
number one.
in high school. I'm not sure exactly, though. I don't remember.
Yeah, I never read it. I think I did. I think it was a school thing. Yeah.
Yep.
Maybe that's why it's the
A lot of
best-selling
them
book
are.
of all time because all the schools bought
possibly.
it because they were forcing you to read the books. You know. The Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens.
It was the best
Makes
of times. It was a.
It's considered a great book, I
Of course.
suppose.
Yeah.
It sold
F. Scott
200
got to be
million.
on there. Catcher and Rye's got to be on there.
Yeah, it's
200
like the
million.
Citizen Kane of books.
John Steinbeck's, I'm sure, on there.
Well, the one number 3 is J.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings.
Oh, wow. Okay, cool.
And that sold 150 million books worldwide.
Wow, that's pretty insane. I'm surprised to see that.
This one I don't know, The Little Prince by Antonio de Saint.
It's a French story.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Oh, really?
Oh,
Okay.
you guys, yeah.
No.
And that was
We were
released in
little, they used to-
1943.
Oh, wee.
And 5th on the list is Harry Potter and The Philosopher's Stone.
That's what's up.
Philosopher's Stone.
So yeah, I
All
mean,
right.
there's a lot of good books on there, but I was actually thinking of the Tale of Two Cities and the Don Quixote.
Don
I'd like to go
Quixote.
back to reading that.
All right.
And I'm sure we've all read Grapes of Wrath and
I had to read that in school.
in school.
To Kill a Mockingbird is
To Kill
the
a
other big one. That's like
Mockingbird.
a very common book, in school.
that you
and
have to
shit, yeah.
read. Yeah.
So, but yeah, so anyway, I hope you guys
Animal
really
Farm.
liked that segment, this little mini-sode that we did for you. We're going to try to maybe do some more of these in the future. We want to start getting out more content to you guys, as many
We could do a lot more
as
books
often as we
even.
can. Yeah,
we're
books.
going to do reviews on what videos next time? Who knows?
We're gonna do some
We'll do
stuff like
something,
that.
but we're going to
Don't
keep
forget to
bringing
hit
this.
us up, man. Tell us
Yeah.
what your favorite books are. Hit us up on our
Absolutely.
social media.
Hell yeah, man. Hell yeah. So, we'll see you guys next time, and stay tuned. And if you haven't seen it yet, go back and watch that episode that came out on Tuesday.
Yeah.
Okay? Yeah. You know who I'm talking about. I'm talking to you.
That's right.
All right.
You.
Take care, guys.
Bye.
Bye bye.